Welcome. If you found your way here tonight, then something in you is ready to rest. Maybe the day was too long, or too loud, or just too much. Maybe your mind is still spinning, even though your body is exhausted. That's okay. You don't have to fix any of that right now. All you have to do is stay right here and breathe and let your eyes grow heavy. Tonight, we're going to take a very slow, very gentle journey through some of the most quietly remarkable animals on Earth. Creatures that carry within them one of nature's most peaceful secrets, the ability to grow back what has been lost. Let that idea settle over you like a blanket. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me what time it is where you are, and one word for how you're feeling tonight. And if this is the kind of content that helps you sleep, I'd love for you to subscribe. So this little space is always here for you when you need it. Take a moment to settle. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Feel the weight of your body pressing gently downward, held and supported. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. Just breathe in slowly and let the air go just as slowly. The world outside can wait. Whatever you were carrying today, you can set it down for now. It will still be there in the morning, and you can decide what to do with it then. But right now, in this moment, there is only this gentle voice and the quiet and the slow miracle of the natural world. Let yourself be here. Let yourself rest. The tide pools of the Pacific coast. Along the western edge of North America, where the land meets the ocean in a long, uneven seam of rock and salt water, there are places where the tide pulls back each day to reveal a hidden world. These are the tide pools, shallow basins carved into stone by centuries of water and wind, filled and emptied twice a day by the rhythm of the sea. When the tide retreats, it leaves behind a still, glassy world of color and quiet motion. And if you were to crouch down at the edge of one of these pools and let your eyes adjust, you would find something extraordinary. The sea star rests at the center of a flat rock, its 5 arms spread wide and unhurried. It is a burnt orange, almost the color of an autumn leaf, and its surface is covered in tiny, irregular bumps that catch the afternoon light and scatter it in every direction. The sea star does not move quickly. It moves in the way that time-lapse photography reveals. Slowly, imperceptibly, as though it is thinking very carefully about each inch of ground it crosses. And this slowness, this patient, unhurried way of moving through the world, is one of the things that makes the sea star so peaceful to observe. But there is something even more remarkable about this animal than its color or its stillness. The sea star can grow back a lost arm. If a predator takes one, or if an arm is injured beyond repair, the sea star simply begins the long, quiet work of regeneration. Over the course of weeks and months, a new arm slowly emerges from the place where the old one was, growing steadily, filling back in, until the animal is whole again. There is no urgency in this process, no panic, just the slow, patient work of cells arranging themselves in exactly the right way, doing exactly what they were designed to do. Some species of sea star can do something even more astonishing. A single severed arm, if it carries with it a fragment of the central body, can grow into an entirely new sea star. The arm becomes an animal. Life, beginning again from almost nothing. The water in the tide pool shifts gently in the breeze. A hermit crab moves across the bottom, carrying its borrowed shell with care. A small anemone opens and closes its tentacles in slow, rhythmic pulses, as if breathing in time with the sea. The light changes as a cloud passes overhead, and the pool dims for a moment, and then brightens again. Everything here moves in cycles. The tide comes in and goes out. The light brightens and fades. The sea star grows and rests and grows again. There is nothing to rush here, nothing to fix, just the quiet, patient world of the tide pool, doing what it has always done. The forests of the eastern axolotl. Deep in the canals and lakes of Mexico, in water that is cool and dark and still, there lives an animal that looks as though it came from a dream. The axolotl is a salamander, a small one, rarely more than a foot in length, and it spends its entire life in water, never undergoing the transformation into a land-dwelling creature that most of its relatives experience. Instead, it remains in a kind of permanent youth, with its feathery gills splaying out from either side of its head like small, delicate fans, moving gently in the current. The axolotl is pale, sometimes almost white, sometimes a soft golden color, sometimes a deeper brownish gray, and its eyes are small and dark and calm. It moves through the water with an effortless grace, its 4 small legs drifting beneath it, its flat tail swaying slowly from side to side. Watching an axolotl move through still water is like watching a leaf fall on a windless day. There is no hurry in it, no effort, just a smooth, continuous, unhurried drift from one place to another. And the axolotl can regrow almost any part of its body. A lost limb will grow back, fully formed, complete with bone and muscle and nerve. A damaged eye can be repaired. Even portions of the heart and brain can regenerate, something that no other vertebrate can accomplish. Scientists have studied the axolotl for more than a century, trying to understand how it does this, and the answers they have found speak of a kind of cellular intelligence, of cells that know, instinctively and without instruction, exactly what they need to become. But to watch the axolotl in its natural habitat, or in the quiet glass of an aquarium, moving through green water, past trailing plants, is not to think about science. It is to feel something quieter, something like wonder, something like the particular peace that comes from being in the presence of a creature that is simply, completely, perfectly itself. The water around the axolotl is very still. Somewhere above the surface of the canal, a heron stands motionless at the edge of the bank, watching the water with focused, patient eyes. A dragonfly hovers for a moment, and then is gone. The light filtering through the surface of the water creates long, shifting patterns on the muddy bottom, and the axolotl drifts through these patterns as though it is made of light itself. There is a particular kind of quiet that belongs to still water, not the silence of absence, but the silence of fullness. The world above the water is busy and bright, but down here, just below the surface, everything is slow and cool and undisturbed. The axolotl lives in that quiet, completely at home, growing and resting and growing again. The rocky coastlines of New England, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the granite shores of Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut, the rocks are covered in a kind of living tapestry. Barnacles cluster in thick, pale colonies just at the waterline. Mussels pile on top of one another in dark, blue, black heaps, and moving slowly among them, inching across the wet stone with a patience that seems almost deliberate, are the blue-gray shapes of periwinkle snails. But it is the lobster that lives in the deeper water just offshore, in the rocky crevices and shadowed hollows of the ocean floor, that carries one of this coastline's most remarkable secrets. The lobster, that armored, slow-moving creature of the deep, can regrow a lost claw. If a claw is severed in a struggle, and lobsters do struggle, slowly, heavily, with great patience, the animal will simply begin the process of growing it back. The new claw will be smaller at first, softer. It will harden over time and grow with each molt, until eventually, after years of patient growing, it is indistinguishable from the one that was lost. The lobster does not worry about this process. It does not mourn the lost claw or feel diminished by it. It simply continues, moving through the dark water, feeling its way across the rocky bottom with its long antennae, living the slow, unhurried life of a creature that has been doing this for 360 million years. In the cold water off the coast of Maine, in October, when the air above the surface smells of salt and fallen leaves, the lobster settles into its crevice as the temperature drops. It will spend the winter in the deep water, moving little, eating little, conserving. Spring will come slowly, the way it always does on this coast, and the water will warm by degrees, and the lobster will begin to move again, and life will continue. The ocean here is a deep blue-gray, the color of slate on a cloudy afternoon. The waves come in steadily, one after another, breaking against the granite with a sound like a long, slow exhale. The seagrass moves just below the surface in long green ribbons, and in the quiet darkness of the ocean floor, the lobster rests and waits and grows. The rainforests of Central America, in the dense layered forests that cover the mountains and valleys of Costa Rica and Panama and Guatemala, the air is warm and thick and full of sound. Insects make a continuous, high shimmering music. Birds call from somewhere deep in the canopy. A flute-like note, rising and falling, echoing off the trunks of tall trees. Water drips steadily from leaf to leaf, a remnant of the rain that fell hours ago and is still finding its way down through all the layers of green. And somewhere in the shade of a broad, dark leaf, resting absolutely still, is a small gecko. It is pale green, almost translucent, and its toes are spread wide against the surface of the leaf, each one covered in the microscopic hairs that allow it to cling to almost any surface. Its eyes are large and bright and unblinking. Geckos do not have movable eyelids, and so they groom their eyes with their tongues, a quick, wet flicker that happens and is over before you have quite registered it. The gecko can shed its tail. When a predator grabs it, the tail detaches cleanly and continues to wriggle on the ground for a minute or two, distracting the predator while the gecko escapes. This is called autotomy, self-removal, and it is a deliberate act, a decision made at the cellular level. The gecko chooses to release its tail rather than lose its life, and then, over the weeks that follow, the tail grows back. Not exactly the same. The new tail is often a slightly different color or a slightly different texture, but it grows back and it works, and the gecko is whole again. It goes about its business in the leaf litter and on the mossy trunks of trees, hunting insects in the slow, careful way that geckos hunt. And the lost tale is not something it grieves or remembers. It is simply gone, and then it's not gone, and life continues. In the rainforest, everything is in a constant state of becoming. Leaves grow and fall and are consumed and become soil and feed new growth. Animals lose and regrow and repair. The forest itself is a kind of living demonstration of regeneration, of life's insistence on continuing, on finding a way, on beginning again from whatever is left. The rain begins again in the late afternoon, the way it almost always does in this forest. It starts with a few large drops on the highest leaves of the canopy, and then it builds, and within a few minutes, it is a steady, soft roar of water on green. The gecko presses itself against the underside of its leaf and waits. The birds fall quiet. The insects adjust their rhythms slightly, and then continue. The forest accepts the rain the way it accepts everything, completely, without resistance, as though it had always known this was coming. The shallow reefs of the Caribbean. Below the surface of the warm turquoise water that surrounds the islands of the Caribbean, the world is full of color and slow movement. The coral reef rises from the sandy bottom, like a city built from stone and light, its towers and arches and caves casting deep shadows where small fish gather in clusters, moving in and out of the shade with quick, silent turns. The coral itself is an animal, or rather, millions of animals, each one called a polyp, smaller than a grain of sand, living in colonies so dense that they build mountains. Each polyp is attached to a stony cup. It is made from calcium it drew from the sea, and from this cup it extends its tiny tentacles into the water, filtering food, growing, adding to the structure that surrounds it. When a piece of coral is broken off by a storm or a clumsy fin, the remaining piece, if it lands in a place with the right light and the right water, will begin to grow again. Slowly, patiently, over years and decades. The reef repairs itself from whatever remains. The parrotfish moves along the reef with a kind of heavy, leisurely grace. Its scales are brilliant, turquoise and pink and green and yellow, colors that seem to glow from within. And its beak, fused from modified teeth, makes a soft crunching sound as it bites pieces of coral away and grinds them into sand. It is the parrotfish that creates much of the white sand beach. It is eating and making and moving all at once, leaving behind a light trail of fine white sand that drifts slowly down to settle on the ocean floor. Below the reef, in a shaded crevice, a moray eel rests with its mouth open slightly. Not aggressively, but simply because that is how it breathes. And its face, even at rest, always looks a little startled. The eel is long and smooth and muscular, and it lives here in the reef the way a particular piece of furniture lives in a room. It is so thoroughly at home that it is almost part of the architecture. The water above the reef is very clear. You can see the surface from down here, a moving mirror of silver and light. Small bubbles rise from somewhere and catch the light as they go. A school of blue tang fish moves as a single organism, turning in one smooth arc as though operated by a single thought. And then they are gone around the curve of the reef. The Caribbean afternoon is warm and still. On the surface, the water is so flat and clear that it seems to breathe rather than move. And below it, in the soft, filtered light, The reef goes on being exactly what it has always been: patient, slow, rebuilding itself from the inside out, one polyp at a time. The deep forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the old-growth forests of Oregon and Washington and British Columbia, the trees are so tall that you cannot see their tops without tilting your head all the way back. Douglas firs and Sitka, spruce, and western red cedar, some of them older than any building standing in North America, rise from a floor that is deep with moss and fern and the fallen, rotting bodies of older trees. The air here smells of damp earth and bark and the particular clean smell that follows rain. In this forest, the Pacific giant salamander makes its home. It lives under logs and in the cold streams that run through the mossy valleys, and it is one of the largest terrestrial salamanders in the world. It can grow to a foot in length, and it is thick and muscular in the way that cold water animals tend to be. Its skin is dark, a mottled brown and black, sometimes with a copper sheen, and damp always, because its skin must stay moist for it to breathe. The Pacific giant salamander, like many salamanders, can regenerate. A lost limb will grow back. A damaged tail will regrow. The process is slow and quiet, happening cell by cell, layer by layer, in the deep shade under a mossy log while the rain falls steadily outside, and the creek runs clear and cold nearby. The forest is always dripping. Even on a dry day, the moisture that is collected in the canopy above falls steadily down through all the layers, from the tops of the tallest trees to the understory of vine maple and sword fern, and then to the ground, where it sinks into the thick mat of moss and becomes part of the creek. The sound of water is constant here, and it is one of the most soothing sounds in the natural world. Not dramatic, not urgent, just continuous and soft, like a hand resting lightly on your shoulder. In the evening, the light in this forest turns a deep amber green, filtered through the canopy and the wet air and the moss on every surface. An owl settles on a high branch and sits without moving. The salamander beneath its log does not know the owl is there. It breathes and grows and rests. The forest breathes with it. The freshwater marshes of the American South. In the low, flat country of Louisiana and Mississippi, and Georgia, where the land is not quite land, and the water is not quite water. There are vast stretches of marsh and swamp and slow brown river. Spanish moss hangs from the branches of cypress trees, swaying slightly in a warm breeze that smells of mud and water and something green and alive. The water below is dark and still, reflecting the trees above with perfect accuracy, so that the world doubles itself in the quiet surface. In this water lives the planarian, or flatworm, not a dramatic animal, not colorful or fast, just a small, flat, dark shape moving slowly along the bottom of a quiet pool, gliding on cilia, sensing the world with the simple receptors on its rounded head. The planarian is one of the most remarkable regenerators in the animal kingdom. Cut it in half, and each half will grow into a complete animal. Cut it into many pieces, and each piece, no matter how small, will regenerate into a whole planarian. The headpiece grows a new body. The body piece grows a new head. Smaller fragments grow everything they need from what remains. Scientists have experimented with planarians in extraordinary ways, training individual animals to navigate mazes and then removing their heads and discovering that, once the head regenerated, the knowledge remained. somehow stored, not in the brain, but distributed through the entire body in a way that is still not fully understood. Life is full of mysteries like this, quiet and profound, hiding in the most ordinary seeming places. The marsh in summer is a place of great abundance and sound. Frogs call from the edges of the water, a deep, resonant bass note from the bullfrogs, and a higher, more tentative call from the green frogs along the shore. Red-winged blackbirds perch on the cattails and swing slightly in the breeze, their red and yellow shoulder patches bright against the gray-green of the reeds. A great blue heron stands motionless at the water's edge, its reflection an exact copy below. The smell of the marsh in the early evening is heavy and organic and warm. The smell of water and mud and a million small living things, all going about their business without any awareness of being observed. Dragonflies hover above the surface, their wings moving so fast they are invisible, their bodies catching the low golden light like small jewels. The water moves in slow circles around the roots of the cypress trees, and the Spanish moss continues its slow, ancient swaying. And somewhere beneath the surface, in the dark, cool mud, the planarian goes on doing what it has always done. The grasslands of East Africa, on the vast, dry plains of Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda, where the grass stretches to the horizon in every direction, and the sky is enormous, and the light is intense and golden. The natural world operates at a scale that is difficult to hold in the mind. The Serengeti, the Masai Mara, the Amboseli. These are places where the planet still breathes the way it breathed before human history began, in long cycles of rain and drought, growth and fire, abundance and scarcity. It is not the lion or the elephant or the giraffe that carries the regeneration secret of this landscape. It is something much smaller. The starfish-like animal called the sand dollar, found on the beaches of nearby coastal Tanzania, can regenerate its spines. The spines cover the animal's flat, disc-shaped body in a dense, even layer, and when they are broken, by a wave, by a predator, by the movement of sand, new ones grow in their place, slowly and evenly, restoring the animal's surface to its original smoothness. But even further inland, in the dry acacia woodland that borders the open grassland, the skink, a small, smooth-scaled lizard, presses itself against a warm rock in the morning sun, absorbing heat with quiet efficiency. The skink's tail, like the gecko's, can be released and regrown. The new tail grows back paler at first, soft and fragile, and then hardens and darkens over the weeks that follow until it matches the rest of the animal. The grassland in the morning is lit from the east, from a sun that rises fast here, near the equator, and by 8 o'clock has already climbed high into the sky and begun its long work of warming the earth. The grass catches the light and holds it, millions of individual stalks, each lit from one side, so that the whole plain seems to glow from within. A family of warthogs trots across an open stretch of ground, moving in single file, their tails held straight up like small flags. A zebra lifts its head from the grass and looks toward the middle distance for a long moment, then returns to grazing. The heat of the day builds slowly and inevitably. By midday, everything has found shade. The acacia trees cast narrow pools of shadow on the pale ground. The skink retreats under a flat rock. The warthogs have found a muddy hollow near a dry riverbed and are lying in it, content and quiet. The grassland rests in the heat, and the light shimmers, and time seems to slow and thicken in the afternoon warmth. The Arctic Ocean, far to the north, where the world is white and vast and the sky in winter goes weeks without true darkness, the Arctic Ocean is covered in ice that moves in slow, enormous pieces across the top of the globe. The ice is blue in places, a deep, crystalline blue, where it is thick and old, and on its surface, the polar bear moves with a careful, deliberate grace that belies its enormous size. But beneath the ice, in the cold black water, strange and beautiful things are happening. The Arctic sea urchin moves across the ocean floor, a dark, spiny globe bristling with long, thin spines that wave gently in the slow current. The spines, like those of the sand dollar, can be regenerated if broken. But more remarkable than this is the urchin's capacity to simply continue, to live and feed and move through the dark water with the same unhurried patience that it has always had, regardless of what the world above the ice is doing. The jellyfish that drift through Arctic waters are another kind of quiet marvel. The moon jellyfish, pale and translucent, pulsing slowly through the cold water, can regenerate significant portions of its bell if it is damaged. And there is one jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, the so-called immortal jellyfish, that when it is stressed or injured or aged, can revert to an earlier stage of its life cycle and begin again. It does not exactly regenerate in the traditional sense, but it does something more extraordinary. It turns back the biological clock. It becomes young again, and then it grows. And if it is stressed again, it becomes young again. This cycle can repeat indefinitely. It may, in theory, never die of old age. The Arctic Ocean in winter is a place of extraordinary silence. The ice dampens sound. The darkness is deep and complete. But in that darkness, the creatures of the deep continue, pulsing, drifting, feeding, growing, regenerating, doing what they have always done, undisturbed by the cold or the dark or the weight of the water above them. In summer, the light returns. The ice retreats and the water opens, and the surface, for a few months, comes alive with the feeding frenzy of migrating seabirds and the long, slow surfacing of whales. The narwhal, that improbable animal with its single long tusk spiraling from its upper jaw, rises to breathe, its back catching the midnight sun before it descends again into the cold water. And the regeneration continues, quietly, in the dark. The mountain streams of Appalachia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Great Smoky Mountains, and all the long ridges and hollows of the Appalachian chain, the streams run cold and clear and fast over beds of rounded gravel and flat, moss-covered stone. The water comes from underground springs and from the rain that falls on the high ridges and finds its way down through the forest in 100 small paths that join and join again until they become something larger and faster and louder. In these cold streams lives the hellgrammite, the larva of the Dobson fly, a strange, dark, heavily armored creature that lives under rocks and feeds in the cold water for up to 3 years before it emerges to become an adult. The hellgrammite is not beautiful in any conventional sense, but there is something arresting about the way it clings to the underside of a stream rock, completely at home in the fast current, perfectly adapted to this cold and difficult environment. More relevant to our story is the brook salamander, several species of which live in the cool, shaded streams of these mountains that can regenerate its limbs and tail. These animals are small and easily overlooked, hiding under leaf litter and stream rocks, coming out at night to hunt insects and small invertebrates. They are quiet animals, slow animals, animals that live their entire lives within a few hundred feet of where they were hatched. Their world is small and bounded and sufficient. The sound of a mountain stream is one of the most immediately soothing sounds in the natural world. It is complex, not a single note, but a constant shifting texture of water over stone, of deep pools and riffles, and the particular hollow sound that water makes as it falls from one level to the next. It fills the ears completely, pleasantly, the way white noise does, smoothing out the sharper edges of thought. Standing at the edge of one of these Appalachian streams in the early morning, with mist still in the hollows below, and the first birds beginning to call in the trees above, you would feel very still. The water passes you without any acknowledgement of your presence. The salamander beneath its rock is aware of you only as a slight increase in shadow, and then returns to its patient waiting. The stream continues. The mangrove forests of Southeast Asia, along the coasts of Thailand and Malaysia, and the Philippines and Indonesia, where the land meets the sea in a tangle of roots and salt water and mud, the mangrove forests grow. These are strange, otherworldly places. The trees stand in the water on arching prop roots, their feet in the salt water and their leaves in the humid air. And between them, the water is shallow and dark and thick with sediment. The mangrove roots trap sediment and build new land, slowly, grain by grain, creating the coastline rather than simply occupying it. In the water between the mangrove roots, the mud skipper moves. This is a fish that can breathe air for extended periods, pulling itself along on its pectoral fins, climbing the roots of the mangroves with a surprising agility. It lives in two worlds at once, in the water and on the mud and on the lower branches of the trees, and it moves between them with a cheerful, blundering energy that is somehow both ungainly and perfectly suited to its environment. The mud skipper cannot regrow limbs in the dramatic way that the axolotl or the sea star can, but its fellow inhabitants of the mangrove forest include the ribbon worm, a long, slender animal that can break into pieces when threatened and regenerate each piece into a new animal. The ribbon worm is not conspicuous. It lives in the mud among the roots, threading its long, thin body through tiny gaps in the sediment. But it is there, and it is growing, and it is quietly extraordinary. The mangrove forest at midday is dim and cool beneath the canopy. Light filters through the leaves and the surface of the water and creates moving patterns on the mud below. The sound of the water here is very different from the sound of the open ocean. It is quiet and sheltered, a gentle lapping against the roots, the occasional drip from a leaf, the distant sound of the sea beyond the shelter of the trees. Birds move through the upper canopy, a flash of color, a quick call, and then gone. The water breathes in and out with the tide. At low tide, the mud flats between the roots are exposed to the air and the light, and the mud skippers come out in numbers, moving over the gray mud with their characteristic awkward grace. They watch each other from a respectful distance, and occasionally one will rear up and display its colorful dorsal fin to another. A brief, bright signal, and then it collapses and goes back to its patient, purposeful movement across the mud. The tide will return in a few hours. The water will rise around the roots and cover the mud, and the mud skippers will disappear into holes in the bank or climb higher into the roots. The mangrove forest will go on building its new land, one grain of sediment at a time, patient and continuous, the way all growth is. The desert canyons of the American Southwest. In the red rock country of Utah and Arizona and New Mexico, where the Colorado River has cut the landscape into a series of extraordinary forms, mesas and canyons and arches and the thousand shades of red and orange and purple that the desert wears at different hours of the day. The air is dry and still, and smells of dust and sage and the faint, clean sweetness of the desert after rain. In the narrow crevices of these canyon walls, in the shade where the rock is slightly damp even in summer, the whiptail lizard moves with quick, nervous energy. It is long and sleek, and its tail is truly long and whip-like, and it moves through the desert with a skittering, purposeful speed that seems entirely at odds with the slow pace of everything around it. But at rest, it is perfectly still. It absorbs the warmth of a sun-heated rock with utter economy, its sides barely moving, its eyes half closed. The whiptail's tail, if it is caught by a predator, will detach. The lizard's sacrifice of a body part in exchange for its life, and then, over the following weeks, regrow. The new tail is often a different shade, a lighter color, and its scales are arranged in a slightly different pattern, but it grows back and it works, and the lizard is once again complete. In the deep crevices of the canyon walls, other life goes on. Bats roost in clusters in the shadow of an overhang, their small, dark bodies folded and still through the long day. Cliff swallows have built their mud nests on a vertical wall 100 feet above the canyon floor. And somewhere in the darkest part of the crevice, a scorpion moves with the slow, deliberate patience that scorpions always have, its tail arched over its back, going about its quiet and ancient business. The canyon at sunset is a different world from the canyon at noon. The light strikes the walls at an angle that makes the colors deepen and saturate. The red becomes redder, the orange becomes warmer, the shadows become a deep, rich purple. The air cools quickly once the sun goes below the rim, and the sudden chill is almost shocking after the heat of the day. Bats begin to appear, flickering out of crevices, wheeling against the pink and fading sky. The canyon fills with the sound of the river far below, a constant, low, rushing sound, like something very large breathing very slowly. The lizard has found its rock for the night, a flat surface that still holds some heat from the afternoon sun, and it is still now, waiting for the morning. The desert goes dark, and the stars appear, and the temperature drops steadily, and everything rests. The tidal flats of northern Europe, along the coasts of Germany and the Netherlands and Denmark, where the North Sea meets a landscape that is nearly flat and very wide, there are vast tidal flats, the Wadden Sea, that are exposed at low tide for miles in every direction. At low tide, the mud stretches to the horizon, and the light is particular here, gray and silver and wide, reflecting off the water that still lies in channels and pools across the mud, and off the clouds that move in long, slow processions across the sky. In the mud of the Wadden Sea, life is extraordinary in its density. Lugworms turn the sediment, processing vast quantities of mud through their bodies as they move. Cockles and mussels filter the water as the tide rises and falls, and in the channels and deeper pools, small fish and crabs move through a world that has been built and rebuilt by the tide twice a day, every day, for as long as the sea has been here. The shore crab can regenerate a lost claw. If a claw is torn away in a struggle, and shore crabs do struggle, sideways and determined, along the edges of tide pools and underneath rocks, the animal will molt within a matter of months. And when it does, the new claw will begin to form in the space where the old one was. Over successive molts, the new claw will grow to match the old one in size and function. The tidal flat in the morning, after the tide has retreated, is a place of extraordinary activity. Dunlins and curlews and oyster catchers move across the mud in their thousands, probing and pecking, following some internal map of where the food is most abundant. Their calls carry a long distance in the flat, open air, the curlew's rising, bubbling call, the oyster catcher's sharp piping. And these sounds, combined with the distant sound of the sea and the whisper of wind over the mud, make a kind of music that belongs completely to this place and nowhere else. The tide turns in the early afternoon. You can feel it before you see it. A slight heaviness in the air, a change in the sound of the water in the distance. And then slowly, very slowly, the water begins to return, finding the lowest channels first and flowing along them, widening, deepening, and then spilling out across the mud in a thin, flat sheet that advances steadily. By late afternoon, the mud is covered again, and the birds have gone. And the surface of the Wadden Sea is smooth and gray and wide, as if the low tide had never happened at all. The ancient forests of Japan, in the mountainous interior of Honshu, where the forests of cedar and oak and beech climb the steep slopes in the valleys below, are filled with mist in the morning. There is a quality of quiet that feels very old. The Japanese word for this kind of place is Satoyama, a landscape where humans and nature have coexisted for centuries, each shaping the other slowly and gently. The forests here have been tended, the streams have been channeled in careful ways, and yet everything is green and alive and deeply natural. In these forests, the Japanese fire-bellied newt makes its home in the cold, clear streams and ponds. It is a small animal, rarely more than 5 inches long, with a dark, rough-textured back and a brilliant orange-red belly that it displays when threatened as a warning of its mild toxicity. But what is most remarkable about this animal is the extent of its regenerative ability. The Japanese fire-bellied newt can regrow its limbs, its tail, its eyes, and even portions of its heart, and it can do this repeatedly over the course of its life without any apparent diminishment of ability. Each time it regenerates, the new structure is as complete and functional as the original. The pond where the newt lives is surrounded by mossy rocks and the arching branches of old trees. The water is clear enough to see the bottom, where the newt moves slowly through the waterweed, hunting small invertebrates with the patient, methodical approach that newts have. It is not a hurrying animal. It breathes slowly. It moves deliberately. It lives for decades. Some individuals have been documented living for 25 years or more, and in all that time, it continues to regenerate, continues to repair, continues to be exactly what it is. In the forest above the pond, a nightingale sings in the early morning. Its song is extraordinarily complex, a long, elaborate series of notes that rises and falls and spirals back on itself, filling the forest with a beauty that seems almost unfair in its abundance. The Japanese call this bird the uguisu, and its voice is one of the first signs that winter is ending and spring is beginning. The newt in its pond below does not hear the song or does not respond to it in any way we can observe. But the world around it is briefly, brilliantly full of music. The afternoon in these forests settles into a deep, contented stillness. The mist has burned away by mid-morning, and the light is clear and golden through the leaves. Somewhere below, a stream runs fast and cold over smooth stones. The newt rests in a patch of waterweed, its orange belly turned upward in the dappled light, completely at ease. It will live many more years in this pond, growing and regenerating and resting, and the forest will continue to breathe around it, and the seasons will turn, and everything will be as it has always been. The kelp forests of California. Below the surface of the cold Pacific water off the coast of California, in the green filtering light that reaches down through 60 or 70 feet of water, the giant kelp grows in forests more beautiful and strange than any forest on land. The kelp rises from holdfasts on the rocky bottom, not roots exactly, but anchor points, and grows toward the surface at a rate that can exceed a foot per day in ideal conditions. The fronds sway in the underwater current, and the light moving through them creates a shifting, golden, cathedral-like effect that makes the kelp forest one of the most visually remarkable environments on Earth. In the kelp forest, the California spiny lobster moves along the bottom in the nighttime hours, its long antennae sweeping the water ahead of it, feeling its way through the dark. During the day, it retreats to its den in a crevice or under a ledge, and it rests. The spiny lobster, like its cousin the Maine lobster, can regrow a lost leg through the process of molting. Each time it sheds its old exoskeleton, the new legs come in slightly larger, and a missing leg will gradually reappear and grow to full size over the course of several molts. The Garibaldi fish, brilliant orange, the color of a mandarin orange, glowing against the dark green of the kelp, moves through the forest with a territorial confidence that its small size does not entirely justify. It defends patches of algae that it cultivates, chasing away intruders many times its size. It is protected by law in California, the only state fish with full legal protection, and so it moves through the kelp forest without much concern, a bright, particular presence in the green light. Sea otters float on the surface above, wrapped in kelp fronds to keep from drifting while they sleep. Their round, whiskered faces are turned up toward the sky, their paws folded on their chests, rocking gently on the swell. They are deeply asleep, completely relaxed, held by the kelp and the cold water, as though in a hammock strung between the trees of the forest below. The kelp forest at dusk turns a deeper shade of green, the surface light fades, and the forest becomes shadowed and quiet. Fish that were active in the day retreat to their hiding places among the fronds. The lobster stirs in its den, preparing for the night's foraging. The sea otter, still wrapped in kelp at the surface, barely stirs as the stars begin to appear above. Everything settles into the particular quiet of the kelp forest at night, muffled, green, drifting. the high plains of Mongolia, in the grasslands of Mongolia, where the steppe rolls on in every direction without any feature but the grass and the sky, and the wind blows continuously from the northwest, carrying with it the smell of distance and dry earth, and something that is neither cold nor warm, but simply vast. In this landscape, the animals are adapted to exposure. There are no trees to shelter under, no deep forests to hide in. Everything lives in the open and survives by endurance. The Mongolian vole, a small, mouse-like rodent that lives in burrows in the grassland soil, is not itself a regenerator in the dramatic sense that the sea star or the axolotl is. But the landscape it shares is home to a kind of beetle that can lose its legs to predators and regrow them partially through the process of regeneration, a capacity that is rare among insects, but not unheard of in a few exceptional species. And the grassland itself is a kind of regenerator. After the harsh winters of the Mongolian steppe, when the snow has covered everything and the temperature has dropped to 40 degrees below zero, the grass appears to be dead. But it is not dead. It is waiting. And when the temperature rises in March and April, and the first warmth touches the frozen ground, the grass returns. Not from seeds, but from roots that have survived the winter in the dark beneath the snow. It comes back from what it was, exactly as it was, unchanged by the ordeal. The steppe in summer is golden and wide, and the sky above it seems higher than any sky you have seen before. There is nothing to limit it, nothing to interrupt the distance, and so it seems to go on beyond seeing, beyond imagining, into something that is simply endless. Hawks circle in the thermals above, riding the invisible columns of rising warm air with a lazy, tilting grace. The grass moves in long, rolling waves as the wind passes over it, and the sound of the wind in the grass is the sound of time passing, slow and steady and without concern. At night on the steppe, the stars are overwhelming. There's no light for hundreds of miles in any direction, and the sky fills with stars from horizon to horizon, so many that the spaces between them seem to disappear, and the sky becomes a single, continuous brightness. The vole is below in its burrow, warm and safe. The hawks have found their perches on low outcrops of stone. The grass bends in the dark wind, and overhead, the universe goes on with its own infinite, unhurried business. The tide pools of the Pacific coast. Again, here we return, gently, to the edge of the sea. The tide is out, as it was before. The pools glitter in the evening light, each one a small enclosed world of its own. The sea star is still on its flat rock, or a sea star very much like the one we visited before. Spread wide and patient, its orange color deepening in the warm light of late afternoon. There is something restful about coming back to a familiar place. The tide pool asks nothing of you. It simply continues, doing what it does, whether anyone is watching or not. The hermit crab has found a new shell since last we were here, a slightly larger one, better suited to its current size, which it moved into with great industry and then immediately forgot about. The anemone has been fed by the returning tide and has now closed its tentacles into a smooth, sea-green mound. The sea star has moved. Not far, an inch, maybe two, but in its careful, unhurried way, it has repositioned itself on the rock, perhaps following the slow movement of something edible, perhaps simply adjusting to the changing light. Its arm, the one that was damaged, or perhaps it was a different sea star, but it doesn't matter, is regrowing. You would have to look carefully to see it. A small, pale nub at the place where the old arm ended, the beginnings of something new. The sun touches the water at a low angle, and the whole surface of the tide pool catches fire with reflected light for a brief moment, and then the angle changes, and it is just water again, clear and still. A wave breaks on the rocks outside the pool, and some of the spray reaches the edge and adds a little salt water to the pool, and the anemone opens one tentacle experimentally and then closes it again. This is all. This is everything. The sea star grows its arm. The tide comes and goes. The light changes, and you rest here in this small, enclosed world by the sea, and let the sound of the water carry you. The forests of the eastern axolotl, Einen. Again. The canal at dusk is the color of pewter, reflecting a sky that has gone soft and lavender above the Mexico City mountains. The water is very still. A few reeds at the bank sway very slightly in the evening air, and below the surface, moving through the green water in its unhurried, drifting way, the axolotl continues. It is feeding now, if feeding is the right word for the gentle, open and close motion with which it draws small organisms into its mouth. It does not chase its food. It simply drifts near things that are edible and takes them calmly and without drama. This is a good approach. One could learn from it. The axolotl's gills, those feathery fans on either side of its head, are moving very slightly. More slightly than before, because the water is calm and the oxygen content is adequate, and the axolotl does not need to work hard to breathe. It simply breathes and moves and exists in the water that has always been its home. The city beyond the canal is beginning to light up. Cars move on roads above the water. The sounds of the human world drift down to the surface of the canal, distant, blurred by distance and water, transformed into something that is almost musical from far enough away. The axolotl does not hear this, or if it does not respond to it. It is in its world, which is the water world, which is quiet and complete. There are very few axolotls left in the wild. The canals where they live have been drained and polluted and altered in ways that make life difficult for this quiet animal. But in laboratories and aquariums around the world, and in conservation ponds managed carefully by people who understand what the axolotl is and what it means, these animals continue. They drift and breathe and feed and regenerate. They carry within their cells the secret of renewal, and they go on being, quietly and completely, what they have always been. The rocky coastlines of New England. Again, the fog has come in off the ocean since we were last here. It has settled over the rocks and the water in a quiet gray blanket, muffling sound and softening every edge. The lighthouse at the point, not quite visible now, hidden in the fog, sends its beam out in a slow rotation, appearing and disappearing in the gray without any urgency. The foghorn sounds every 30 seconds, a deep, resonant note that carries a long distance and fades slowly, like a word spoken in a large, empty room. The lobster in its crevice on the ocean floor does not know about the fog. The lobster knows only the cold water and the slow current and the chemical signals it reads with its antennae. The smell of food, the smell of other lobsters, the smell of danger. It knows these things, with a certainty that is deep and instinctive and very old. The new claw is coming in well. Over the course of the summer, through 2 molts, it has grown to about 2/3 the size of the original. The next molt will bring it larger still. The lobster is not aware of this process in any reflective sense. It does not know that it has lost a claw and is regrowing it. It simply is, and the claw is growing, and the process continues as it always has. The fog on the Maine coast at night is one of the great quieting forces of the natural world. It makes the world smaller and softer. It muffles the sound of the waves. It turns the beam of the lighthouse into something beautiful and strange. A finger of light moving through gray air, touching nothing, going on into the dark. The smell of the fog is all salt and cold, and something mineral, clean and ancient. The tide pool that was so bright and clear this afternoon is now barely visible through the fog. The sea star is still there, exactly as we left it. The hermit crab has retreated into its shell. The anemone is closed and smooth. Everything rests in the fog, in the dark, and the sea rolls in steadily from the east, and the foghorn sounds and sounds again. And the night passes over the coast of Maine with great, unhurried patience. The rainforests of Central America, again. The rain has stopped. After hours of steady, heavy rain that turned every leaf into a small fountain and filled the air with a continuous sound like static, the forest is quiet. Or not quiet. The forest is never truly quiet, but quieter. The dripping continues, one drop at a time now, from leaf to leaf, finding a slow path downward through all the layers of the canopy. The smell of the forest after rain is extraordinary. A deep, rich, wet smell that is almost edible, compounded of soil and bark and the particular fragrance of 1,000 different plants, all releasing their moisture at once. The gecko is back on its leaf. In the rain, it had pressed itself against the undersurface and waited with great patience, and now it has emerged and is moving slowly along the leaf, its eyes scanning the air around it for insects that the rain has disturbed from their hiding places. There are many. The forest after rain is alive with small flying things, and the gecko will eat well tonight. The tail is growing. It has been 2 weeks since the old tail was lost, left wriggling on the leaf while the gecko escaped, and already the new one is visible, a pale stub that extends from the base of the spine, soft and slightly translucent. It will take another 2 months to reach full length, and even then it will be slightly different. The scales arranged in a subtly different pattern, the color a shade lighter. But it will be a tail, and it will work, and the gecko will swing it as it moves and balance with it as it climbs, and forget that it was ever anything else. The forest settles into the evening. The last light filters through the canopy and turns the leaves from green to gold. A howler monkey calls from somewhere high above, a deep, resonant sound that carries a mile through the forest, more like wind than like an animal. Then yawn. The frogs begin, a layered, complex sound that builds from a few voices to a chorus as the darkness thickens. And the gecko, on its leaf, does not move. It is waiting. It has all the time in the world. The shallow reefs of the Caribbean. Again, the reef at night is different from the reef in the day. The colors are the same. The coral is still golden and orange and purple. The fish are still vivid, but the light is different. The darkness of the deep water beyond the reef seems to press closer, and the forms of the coral cast different shadows. And the fish that were active in the day have retreated to their hiding places in the crevices of the coral. In their place, the night creatures have emerged. The octopus, which we did not mention before, but which belongs here, on this reef, at this hour, moves across the coral with its slow, rippling grace, its arms exploring every crevice and shadow. The octopus is an extraordinary regenerator. It can regrow a lost arm, including the suckers and the nerves, over the course of a few weeks, and it can change its color and texture so completely and so rapidly that it can become, for all practical purposes, invisible. It can look exactly like the coral it sits on, or the sand it rests on, or the shadow it hides in. The octopus pauses at the edge of a crevice and sends one arm in ahead of it, feeling through the darkness. There is a small crab inside, and the arm finds it and grasps it, and the octopus draws it back out and holds it, while the crab ceases its struggling, and then it is gone, taken into the octopus's beak and eaten with quiet efficiency. The parrotfish, which was so active in the day, is asleep in a cocoon of mucus that it has secreted around itself, a thin, transparent bubble that may protect it from parasites or predators while it sleeps. It hangs in the water inside this cocoon, barely moving, its brilliant scales slightly dimmed in the darkness. A natural sleeping bag made by the fish itself from its own body. The reef provides for it, and it provides for itself, and the two of them, the fish and the reef, go on together through the night. The water above the reef is very dark. The stars are beginning to appear above the surface, and their light reaches the shallow water and makes faint, shifting patterns on the coral. A sea turtle, large and unhurried, passes along the outer edge of the reef, its flippers moving in long, slow strokes, its eyes half open in the dark water. It is going somewhere, or going nowhere in particular. It has been doing this for 80 million years, the sea turtle, and it will continue regardless. The deep forests of the Pacific Northwest. Again. The rain has been falling for 3 days without stopping. Not hard rain. The Pacific Northwest rarely gets hard rain in the winter, but soft, persistent, gray rain that comes and comes, filling the streams and saturating the soil and bringing the moisture level of the air to something very close to water itself. Everything is wet, everything glistens, every surface holds a small pool or a trail of drops, and the sound of water is everywhere. Not dramatic, not urgent, just continuous and soft, as though the forest is humming to itself. The Pacific giant salamander is more active in this rain than it would be in dry weather. It moves along the wet forest floor without any need to conserve moisture, which is ordinarily the constraint on how far and how long it can move. Tonight it is covering ground, slowly, steadily, without hurrying, searching for earthworms and slugs and whatever small invertebrates the rain has brought to the surface. The salamander's tail, which was once damaged, the tip is slightly shorter than it should be. The color, slightly different, continues to grow. It has been growing for 6 months, and it is nearly complete. In another few weeks, it will be indistinguishable from the original. The salamander carries no memory of the injury. It simply is what it is, and the tail is what it is, and the rain falls, and the forest breathes. In the branches above, an owl sits with its feathers slightly puffed against the dampness. It is a spotted owl, the old growth forest's most famous and embattled resident. And it sits very still, watching the forest floor below with eyes that are designed for exactly this: the dark, the wet, the low light of a rainy Pacific night. It can see the salamander moving below. It does not pursue it. The owl is not hungry right now, and it will not hunt unnecessarily. The creek at the bottom of the ravine has risen significantly in 3 days of rain. It runs fast and loud and opaque, full of silt and leaf litter, moving with a confidence that a summer stream does not have. The sound of it carries up through the trees and mixes with the sound of the rain, and the result is a continuous, layered, very soft roar that fills the forest like music. The salamander reaches the bank of the creek and stops at the edge, feeling the current with one foot. It turns and moves along the bank, away from the fast water, toward a pool behind a large log where the water is quieter. This is its hunting ground, its territory, its home. It has been here before. It will be here again. The freshwater marshes of the American South. Again. The marsh in late summer is full. The water is high from summer rains, and the vegetation is dense. Cattails and rushes and arrowhead plants rising from the water in thick stands, and above them the willows and buttonbush, creating a canopy of green that filters the light into something soft and dappled. The sound of the marsh in August is overwhelming in its richness. Frogs and crickets and cicadas, and the occasional splash of a fish or turtle. And above it all, the calling of red-winged blackbirds, which have been calling all summer and will call until October. The planarian, in its quiet pool beneath a mat of floating duckweed, continues. It is neither aware of the richness of the world above it, nor indifferent to it. It simply exists at a different scale and frequency, sensing its world through chemical receptors and simple light detection, moving through the dark water with the simple efficiency of one of the Earth's most ancient animal designs. Somewhere in the pool, a planarian was injured. Perhaps a small fish took a piece of it. Perhaps it was disturbed by a current and torn. Whatever happened, it is now in 2 pieces, and each piece is doing something remarkable. Each is reorienting itself, establishing a head end and a tail end, and beginning the slow, patient work of becoming a complete animal again. The information for how to do this is distributed through the entire body. There is no one place where the plan for a planarian is stored. Every part of the animal knows how to be the whole animal. Every cell carries the memory of what it is and what it needs to become. The evening comes slowly to the marsh, the light, going from gold to orange to pink to lavender, and then to a deep, soft blue. The frogs grow louder as the light fades, and the first fireflies appear above the water, their cold light flickering in random patterns that are beautiful, without being organized. A great blue heron crosses the sky silently, its long wings beating in slow arcs, heading for a different part of the marsh, where it will stand in the dark water and hunt by the light of the stars. The ducks settle onto the water one by one as the light fails, tucking their heads under their wings, resting. The marsh breathes around the planarian. The water moves in slow, small ways. The temperature drops very slightly as the night comes on, and and the two pieces of the planarian go on doing their quiet, extraordinary work, building themselves back into wholeness, one cell at a time, through the warm southern night, the grasslands of East Africa, again. The sun is setting over the Serengeti. The light at this hour is the light that artists come from all over the world to try to capture. A deep, warm, amber light that seems to come from inside the earth as much as from the sky, turning the grass 100 shades of gold and the acacia trees into black silhouettes against an orange and crimson horizon. The wildebeest that have been grazing all day are moving now, slowly, in a long line toward the place where the river bends and there is water. Their shapes are dark against the bright grass. The skink on its rock has watched the sun all day, and now it is watching the sunset. Not watching it? The skink does not watch in that sense, but its direction of orientation has changed, and it is now facing west, toward the warmth of the last sunlight. Its new tail, 3 months old now, grown from the place where the old one was released, is catching the light. It is slightly paler than the rest of the skink's body, and the scales are slightly larger, but otherwise, you would not know it was new. Somewhere below the surface of the nearby lake, Lake Victoria, or the marshes around the Mara River, the water holds its own quiet life. Hippos have been in the water all day, and now, as the air cools, they are beginning to emerge, moving up the bank in their great, heavy, unhurried way, going out to graze in the evening. The hippos move through the same water as the crocodiles, and the crocodiles move through the same water as the catfish and the tilapia, and all of them are part of the same enormous, interconnected system that has been operating without pause for millions of years. The star will not appear in the sky over the Serengeti for another hour, but before they do, the light will pass through all its gradations, from orange to pink to purple to that deep, luminous blue that appears just before dark. And in each phase, the grassland will be different and beautiful in a different way. The wildebeest will reach the river and drink. The skink will move into its night shelter under a flat stone. The fire-bellied skies will deepen and cool, and the great African night will settle over everything like something that has been waiting all day to arrive. The Arctic Ocean. Again, the ice in the Arctic has changed since we were last here. In summer, the ice retreats north, and the dark water is exposed to the long Arctic day. 24 hours of light, day after day, for weeks. The water warms very slightly at the surface, and this tiny warming is enough to trigger an explosion of life. Microscopic algae bloom in the water, turning it green, and these algae feed the krill, and the krill feed the fish, and the fish feed the seals and the whales and the seabirds, and the Arctic becomes, for a few months, one of the most productive environments on Earth. The moon jellyfish drifts through this rich water, its bell pulsing with a slow, metronome regularity. It is eating in its way. Trenane. Its tentacles through the water and catching whatever small organisms come into contact with them. It is almost entirely water itself, 95%, and in the right light, looking down into the green Arctic water, you can see right through it. It is nearly invisible. It is barely there, and yet it lives, and it regenerates, and it continues in that particular way that jellyfish have of continuing, quietly, without drama, without any apparent urgency, through whatever the sea brings. The narwhal surfaces again, several of them, this time a pod of 7 or 8, moving together through the open water at the ice edge. Their tusks catch the low Arctic sun and gleam. They breathe, a soft, explosive sound, the air rushing in and out of those nostrils that have traveled so far forward on their heads. And then they submerge, and the water closes over the place where they were, and the surface is smooth again. The Arctic light in summer does not set. It simply circles, dropping toward the horizon, and then rising again, painting the sky and the water in shades that shift through all the warmth of the spectrum: gold, orange, pink, rose, a pale lavender, and then back to gold again, without ever going fully dark. It is disorienting in the most beautiful way. Time seems to stop, or to circle back on itself. The ice drifts, the whales dive, the jellyfish pulse, and the world continues in its slow, patient, extraordinary way. The mountain streams of Appalachia. Again, October has come to the Appalachian Mountains. The leaves on the hillsides are changing now. The maples first, from green to gold to red, and the oaks behind them, from green to bronze to a rich, dark copper. And the result is that the mountain streams run through a corridor of color that is almost overwhelming in its beauty. The water reflects the trees above it, and the surface of the stream is all moving color, gold and red and orange, breaking and reforming as the current flows over the rocks. The brook trout that have been in these streams all summer are spawning now. The males have turned brilliant, their olive backs still patterned with the worm-like markings that gave them their older name, but their bellies now a deep, luminous orange-red, the color of a coal just before it goes dark. They move upstream with determination, choosing their spawning reds in the gravel where the current is just right and the oxygen level is high. The brook salamander, in the wet leaves beside the stream, is not thinking about the trout. It is hunting, as it does every night at this time of year, searching the leaf litter for the invertebrates that are still active despite the cooling temperatures. Its tail is complete and whole, has been whole for months now, grown back from the stub that remained after last spring's encounter with a garter snake. If you were to look at the salamander now, you would see nothing to indicate that the tail was ever damaged. It is exactly as it should be, in every detail. The stream makes its continuous, flowing, water-over-stone music. The leaves fall from the trees in slow arcs, catching a moment on the air before they reach the water and are taken by the current. The light is golden and low and brief. October afternoons in the mountains are beautiful and short. And then the sun goes behind the ridge and the temperature drops 5 degrees in 10 minutes and the evening begins. An owl calls from the ridge above. The brook trout pause in the current and then resume. The salamander continues its patient hunting in the leaf litter. The stream flows on, cool and clear and full of light, carrying the fallen leaves toward the valley below, carrying the water toward the larger river, carrying everything in its slow and patient way toward the sea. The mangrove forests of Southeast Asia. Again, the tide is returning to the mangrove forest. You can hear it before you see it. a soft increase in the sound of water, a slight rise in the level of the channels between the roots. And then the water begins to move, slowly at first, and then more insistently, filling the channels and rising around the roots and covering the mud that had been exposed all through the low tide. The mud skippers are retreating, moving upward on the roots, finding higher ground as the water rises. They move with their peculiar, energetic, forward-throwing motion, and there is something both comic and admirable about the way they navigate a world that is neither fully land nor fully sea. They are making the best of things, as they have always done, in a place that offers neither the full advantages of land nor the full advantages of water, and surviving, thriving even, in the space between. The ribbon worm in the mud is deeply covered now, the water above it dark and stirred with sediment. Its two pieces, from the disturbance that divided it some weeks ago, are both approaching completion. One is perhaps 90% of a full worm. The other is smaller, still growing, but recognizable now as a worm rather than simply a fragment. The process is slow and has no visible dramatic moments. It is simply happening, cell by cell, in the dark mud, timed not to the rhythm of days and hours, but to the rhythm of cellular division, which is its own calendar, its own clock. Above the water, in the canopy of the mangrove trees, a family of proboscis monkeys settles for the night. The proboscis monkey is a remarkable animal. The male has a large, pendulous nose that amplifies his calls and makes him extraordinarily recognizable. And it lives exclusively in the mangrove forests and lowland rainforests of Borneo and the surrounding coasts. The family arranges itself in the branches above the water, the infants pressed close to their mothers, the adults watching the forest with calm, large-eyed attention. As the light fades, they grow still. The mangrove forest at night is dark and full of the sound of water. The tide is high now, and the water moves gently around the roots, and small fish move through the dark channels, and somewhere a kingfisher calls once from a branch over the water, and then is quiet. The ribbon worm in the mud below all of this continues its patient work. The desert canyons of the American Southwest. Again, the canyon is cold at night. After the scorching heat of the day, 102 degrees at noon in the full sun at the canyon bottom, the temperature has dropped to 58, and the change is almost shocking. The rocks, which held the day's heat for hours after the sun went down, are now cool to the touch. The river at the bottom of the canyon, invisible from the rim, audible as a continuous, distant rush, is the only sound in the dark. The whiptail lizard is deep in its crack in the canyon wall, its body temperature reduced to match the rock around it. It is not asleep in the way a mammal sleeps. Its brain does not cycle through the same stages, but it is at rest, conserving, waiting for the morning sun that will warm the rock and warm its blood and allow it to move again. The new tail, which has been growing for 4 months now, is folded alongside the lizard's body in the narrow crack, pale and smooth, just beginning to show the first faint traces of the scale pattern that will develop over the next few months. The stars above the canyon are extraordinary. Away from any city, in the dry, clear air of the desert at 5,000 feet, the sky is simply covered in stars, not the dozen or so that you can count in a city sky, but thousands, tens of thousands. The full density of the Milky Way stretched from one rim of the canyon to the other, like a river of faint light. The canyon walls below the stars are dark and absolute, cutting two black shapes out of the star field. A bat emerges from a crevice in the canyon wall and begins its circling flight through the dark air, catching insects that are invisible to any eye but the bat's echolocation. Its path is a series of smooth curves and quick adjustments, traced not by sight but by sound reflected back from the world around it. It is perfectly suited to this night, this canyon, this air. It needs nothing that is not here. The night deepens. The temperature continues to drop very slightly. The river runs in the dark. The bat continues its invisible flight. The lizard rests in its crack. And the canyon, which was carved by water over a period of 6 million years, and will continue to be carved for the next 6 million, simply continues to be exactly what it is. The tidal flats of northern Europe, again. The sun sets early over the Wadden Sea in November. By 4 o'clock, the light is gone from the flat, wide sky, and what remains is a long, silvery twilight that sits on the water and the mud and the horizon for another half hour before darkness comes. In this twilight, the last of the birds are returning to their roosts. Thousands of dunlin and golden plover, moving in great synchronized flocks that shift and turn and contract and expand against the silver sky, moving like smoke, like breath, like something that has no individual decision, but only the collective instinct of the flock. The shore crab in its tide pool is still. In the cold November water, crabs move less. Their metabolisms are slowed by the temperature, and they spend more time resting in sheltered places, conserving energy. The new claw is nearly full-sized now. It has been growing since July, through 2 molts, and it is now perhaps 90% of the size it will eventually reach. Next spring, after the water warms and the crab becomes active again and molts a 3rd time, the claw will be complete. The North Sea in November is gray and white and wind-driven. Waves come in from the northwest, from a storm system 500 miles away, and break against the outer edge of the tidal flat in lines of white foam. The smell of the sea here in autumn is very strong, salt and iodine, and the cold mineral smell of deep water, and the sound is constant, a deep, continuous roar that is present always in this place, but is at its most insistent when the wind is from the northwest. A harbor seal hauled out on a sandbar watches the approaching waves with calm, dark eyes. It is not concerned. It has been resting on this sandbar all afternoon, and it will rest here until the tide covers it, and then it will slide into the water without any urgency and swim to a different sandbar and haul out again. The seal's life is a series of resting and swimming and feeding, conducted with a particular marine mammal composure that is very reassuring to witness. The twilight over the Wadden Sea deepens and goes out. The stars appear, faint at first, and then brighter as the light fades completely. The dunlin are settled now in their roosting place, packed close together on a high salt marsh, quiet. The crab is still in its crevice. The seal sleeps on its sandbar. The tide, in the darkness, is beginning its slow return. The ancient forests of Japan, again. Snow has come to the mountains, not much, a light dusting on the highest peaks, visible from the valleys below as a white edge along the top of the dark ridgeline. But enough to say that winter is coming. In the valleys, the leaves of the beech trees have turned gold and copper and are beginning to fall, slowly, one by one, drifting down through the still air to join the deepening mat of leaves on the forest floor. The pond where the Japanese fire-bellied newt lives has cooled significantly. The newt moves more slowly now, not lethargic, but deliberate, conserving energy as the temperature drops. It will spend the winter in the mud at the bottom of the pond in a state of semi-dormancy, its metabolism reduced to a fraction of its summer rate. Its heart beats more slowly. Its breathing slows. It needs very little food. But before it retreats to the mud, it is hunting. With the same patient, methodical approach it always has, moving through the waterweed with slow, careful movements, its orange belly vivid against the dark water. The forest above the pond is dropping its last leaves, and some of them fall into the water and float for a while on the surface before absorbing water and sinking to the bottom, where they will decompose over the winter and become part of the nutrient system that feeds the pond. The nightingale has long since left. It migrated south in August, and the forest since then has been quieter, beautiful still, extraordinary still, but with a different quality of quiet, the quiet of a place where the most prominent voice is temporarily absent. The cedars and cryptomeria keep their green needles through the winter, and so the forest is never entirely bare, but the broadleaf trees are now skeletal against the sky, their shapes dramatic and spare. In the deep silence of the late autumn forest, the only sounds are the occasional call of a jay, the creak of a branch moving in the light breeze, and the steady, soft drip of water from the trees. The newt reaches the bottom of the pond and settles into the mud, and the mud closes around it, and it rests. The forest above closes over for the winter, and the pond surface goes still, and the snow on the high peaks above does not melt. Everything is very quiet. Everything is resting. Everything is waiting for what comes next, which will come, as it always does, in exactly the right time. The kelp forests of California. Again, a storm has passed. The swell that it generated is still arriving on the California coast 2 days later. Long, powerful waves that roll in from the northwest and break on the outer reefs with a sound that travels miles inland. Under the surface, in the kelp forest, the storm's influence is felt as a long, slow surge that pushes the kelp in one direction and then pulls it back, over and over. A rhythm like breathing, but larger and slower. The California spiny lobster is back in its den. It spent last night out foraging, moving across the rocky bottom in the dark, and now it has returned and is settled behind a ledge, antennae waving slowly. Its missing leg, lost some months ago to a moray eel that was perhaps less careful than usual, is now visible as a small, pale bud at the base of the missing limb. It will grow back fully with the next molt, which will happen in the spring when the water warms. The Garibaldi is still orange, still territorial, still moving through the kelp forest with its particular confidence. It does not notice the swell, which moves through its world as a large, slow force that carries it gently one way and then the other. It simply adjusts, as it always does, and continues. The sea otters on the surface have been in the water for days without hauling out. There is no good haul-out site near here, and the otters are comfortable in the water in a way that most mammals are not. They are grooming constantly, which is not just vanity, but necessity. Their fur traps air, and the air provides insulation, and if the fur becomes matted or wet, it loses its insulating property, and the otter, which has no blubber, will quickly become dangerously cold. So they groom and they eat. They must eat a quarter of their body weight in food every day, and they float, and they sleep wrapped in kelp, and the swell moves through them, and they go with it. The kelp forest is old, in the way that forests are old. Individual plants are not long-lived. They grow for a few years and then die. But the forest as a whole has been here for centuries, regenerating from its holdfasts when storms break the fronds, growing back from whatever remains when disturbance passes. It is a self-renewing system, and its capacity for renewal is one of the things that makes it so extraordinary. The storm swell fades over the next few days. The ocean settles. The kelp stands upright again, waving gently in the lighter surge. The lobster rests in its den. The otter floats in its kelp cradle. The Garibaldi patrols its territory, and the forest goes on being exactly what it is: slow, green, patient, and alive. The high plains of Mongolia. Again, winter has come to the Mongolian steppe. The grass that was golden in summer is now gray and bent under a thin layer of snow. The wind blows from the northwest with a persistence that is extraordinary, even for this place that is almost defined by its wind. A cold, dry wind that carries ice crystals and pushes the snow into drifts against any obstacle. Rocks, the occasional scrub bush, the mound of a vole's burrow. The vole is below ground in its burrow system, which it shares with several other voles in the communal warmth of an underground world. The burrow is lined with dry grass and the shed fur of various animals and whatever other soft material the voles have collected over the summer. And it is surprisingly warm inside and quiet, buffered from the howling wind above by 2 feet of frozen earth. The voles huddle together, conserving warmth, their hearts beating faster than any human heart could sustain. Above ground, the steppe is vast and white and almost featureless. A few saxaul bushes break the horizon line. A frozen river glints in the distance, and far overhead, against a sky that is the particular blue of extreme cold, a blue so clear and deep it seems to belong to a different atmosphere altogether. A golden eagle circles. It is hunting or looking for something to hunt, moving on the updrafts along the edge of a low ridge with those long, slow turns that eagle flight always has. It sees everything below with its extraordinary eyes. It sees the shapes of the burrow mounds under the snow, the tracks of voles that ventured out and went back, the shape of a frozen rabbit at the base of a rock. The steppe in winter is a place of stark, absolute beauty. There is nothing soft about it. Everything is reduced to its essentials: white ground, blue sky, the dark shapes of hawks and eagles against the light, the low humps of snow-covered earth. It is the beauty of reduction, of a world stripped of everything unnecessary, down to the bone. The grass beneath the snow is alive. It is dormant, its metabolic processes slowed almost to zero, but it is alive. When the temperature rises in March and the snow melts and the first warm days arrive, the grass will come back, not from seeds, but from itself, from the roots that have been waiting in the frozen earth all winter, ready to begin again the moment the conditions are right. Regeneration does not always look like growth. Sometimes it looks like waiting. The tide pools of the Pacific coast, once more. We have come back again, to the beginning, to the edge of the sea. It is morning now, early morning, the sky not fully light, the horizon a pale line of gold above the dark water. The tide is very low, lower than it was in the evening, the lowest tide of the month, drawn down by the alignment of the moon. The pools are exposed fully, their edges gleaming in the low, early light. The sea star is still on its rock. It has moved again, very slightly, perhaps an inch or two from where it was last night. Its 5 arms are spread wide, touching the rock at their tips, the small tube feet underneath, making the tiny, continuous effort that keeps the animal in place against the slow surge of the sea. Its color, in the early morning light, is deeper, more saturated than it was in the evening. The particular orange-red of the California sea star, the color of dried marigolds, of rust on a wet rock, of an autumn sunset seen through fog. The arm that was regrowing is now unmistakably an arm. In the weeks that we have been away, it has grown from a pale nub to a recognizable limb, perhaps half the length of the others, narrowing to a slight point at its tip. The scales on its surface are smaller and more regular than those on the other arms, and its color is very slightly lighter, but it is an arm, and it is growing, and within a few more months it will be indistinguishable from the others. The sun has appeared on the horizon. It comes up fast here. There is nothing between the tide pool and Japan to slow it down, and within minutes, the quality of the light has changed from gray to gold. The tide pool catches the early light and holds it, and every drop of water on every surface of coral and shell and rock glitters with its own small sun. The hermit crab, its borrowed shell catching the light, moves purposefully toward the edge of the pool. The anemone opens, unfurls its tentacles into the brightening water, begins its patient work of feeding. The sea star does not know about the sun. It does not experience the morning the way we do, but it is alive in the morning, in this pool, in this light, doing exactly what it does. And its arm is growing. And the world around it is exactly as beautiful as it always is at this hour. And something about this, all of it together, is profoundly reassuring. The ocean is very blue this morning. The waves come in from the west, long and rolling, born from a storm somewhere far out to sea, carrying their energy across thousands of miles of open water to spend it here, on these rocks, in this gentle breaking and retreating. Somewhere out there, beyond where you can see, the sea floor is alive with the same patient creatures that live here in the pools. Sea stars and urchins and anemones and the 1,000 other small lives that the ocean holds. The world is very old and very full. Every pool is a whole world. Every creature is doing something remarkable. And all of it is happening right now, whether we are watching or not. The sea star growing its arm, the axolotl drifting in its canal, the newt resting in the mud of its winter pond, the lobster in its crevice, the gecko on its leaf, the jellyfish pulsing through the dark Arctic water. All of it is happening, and all of it is patient, and all of it continues. The forests of the eastern axolotl, once more. The canal in winter is the quietest it is all year. The water is colder than it was in summer or autumn, and the axolotl moves more slowly, and the city above the canal is muffled by winter clouds and fog, and the general quiet that settles over even the busiest places in the cold months. The reeds along the bank are brown and brittle. The few trees that grow near the canal have lost their leaves. Everything has a spare, clean quality that belongs to winter. The axolotl in the cold water is still. Not as slow as it will be if the temperature drops further. It is not yet in the very bottom of its range, but slower than in summer, more deliberate, resting for longer periods between its slow forays for food. Its gills move very slightly in the still water. Its eyes, those small, dark, perfectly calm eyes, are open. It is, in some sense, watching, observing, simply being present in its world. The axolotl's regenerative capacity is not diminished by the cold. If it were injured now, if a limb were lost, the process would simply be slower in the cold water, the cells dividing at a rate governed by the temperature of their environment. In summer, a lost limb might regenerate in as little as 3 weeks. In winter, the same process might take 2 months, but it would happen, as it always does. The capacity is not seasonal. It does not take time off. This is perhaps one of the most comforting things about the axolotl. It is always capable of renewal. In every season, in every condition, through warmth and cold, abundance and scarcity, the axolotl retains its ability to begin again. It does not need to be in perfect conditions. It does not need to have everything right. It simply needs to be alive and to be itself, and the renewal will come. The canal is quiet. The water is cold and dark. The axolotl rests and breathes. Outside, the city goes on, as cities do, relentlessly, without pause. But here, in this water, the old calm of an ancient animal continues, unchanged. The rocky coastlines of New England, once more. The harbor at dawn in March has ice in it still. Not the solid ice of January, but loose, slushy ice that moves with the current and collects in the corners and against the pilings, and will be gone by the time the sun has been up for an hour. The lobster boats are heading out, their running lights still on in the pre-dawn, their engines a low, steady thrumming in the quiet harbor. The gulls that always follow the lobster boats are beginning to gather, calling in their loud, unmusical way, circling above the boats and watching. Down on the ocean floor, well beyond the harbor mouth, in 60 feet of cold, dark water, the lobster with the regenerating claw is active. It is early in the season. The water is still cold, but the lobster has emerged from the deeper, quieter water, where it spent the winter and is moving across the rocky bottom, its antennae reading the chemical landscape of the seafloor. There is a trap nearby, baited with herring. The lobster knows about the trap. It has been in traps before and come out. It approaches it carefully, reads the bait's smell, and turns away. It knows this combination of smells. It has learned. The new claw is fully formed now. After 8 months and 3 molts, the claw has reached its final size, slightly smaller still than the original, which was its dominant claw, and which will take a few more molts to fully match. But it is functional. The lobster can grasp with it, can crack shells with it, can defend itself. The process is complete, or as complete as it needs to be for the lobster to live its life fully. The morning brightens over the harbor. The ice at the pilings has melted into slush, and the slush is thinned and broken apart, and the water is clear again, running fast with the incoming tide. The lobster boats have reached their first string of traps, and the captain is hauling, the winch whining as the line comes up, the trap breaking the surface with a gush of water. Whatever is in the trap, and whatever is not, is managed with quick, practiced hands, and the trap goes back over the side and down into the dark water, and the boat moves on to the next one. The lobster, far below, has found something to eat, a sea urchin, its spines no match for the lobster's claws. The lobster feeds, slowly and methodically, and moves on. The morning continues. The harbor fills with light. The ice is gone entirely by 9 o'clock, and the water in the harbor is clean and blue, and the lobster boats are small shapes moving against the horizon, and the day has fully arrived. The rainforests of Central America. Once more, the dry season has come to this rainforest, which means only that the rain falls less frequently. Not that it stops entirely. In the dry season, the mornings are bright and clear, and the air is slightly less saturated with moisture, and you can see the mountains above the forest canopy on clear days, their peaks catching the last of the winter cold. The afternoon thunderstorms still come, but they are shorter than in the wet season, and the forest dries out more between them. The gecko has survived its first year with a regenerated tail. The tail is now full-sized, and the difference in scale pattern from the original is so subtle that you would only notice it if you were looking carefully. The gecko has not noticed. It goes about its business in the leaf litter and on the bark of trees with exactly the same deliberate, methodical approach it always has, hunting insects in the long evenings, resting through the heat of the day, navigating its small territory with the certainty of an animal that knows every inch of it. The rainforest in the dry season is, if anything, more spectacular in some ways than in the wet season. The air is cleaner, the visibility is longer. The insect populations have crashed back from the height of the wet season, and the forest is quieter. And in the quiet, you can hear things you couldn't hear before. The specific call of a bird far back in the canopy, the sound of a single insect in the leaf litter. The light on a clear, dry season morning comes through the canopy in distinct rays that move across the forest floor as the sun travels, illuminating patches of fern and fallen leaves in a slowly moving theater of light. A troop of spider monkeys passes through the canopy above the gecko's territory, 5 of them moving with their characteristic swinging, flowing style, using their long arms and prehensile tails to travel through the upper canopy with a speed and confidence that seems almost aerial. They are here for the fruit in the cecropia trees at the edge of the clearing. They don't notice the gecko. They rarely notice anything smaller than a large snake, and even then, their response is an alarm call rather than flight. The gecko watches them go. It is very still, as geckos are when something large passes. Motionlessness is its best defense, along with its cryptic coloring that makes it almost invisible against bark or leaf. When the monkeys have gone, it resumes its slow search for insects, its new tail swinging slightly as it moves, balanced and functional and complete. the shallow reefs of the Caribbean, once more. It is midsummer, and the Caribbean water is at its warmest. 84 degrees, the warm, silky temperature that makes diving here feel like entering a bath. The reef below is in its fullest expression of color and life. Corals extended, fish active, every niche occupied by something specific and precisely adapted to it. The parrotfish is eating, as it always is, its beak crunching through coral with a sound that carries clearly through the water. The sand it creates falls in a light curtain below it, drifting toward the sandy bottom. The coral has repaired the section that was damaged by a boat anchor last season. It grew slowly. Coral always grows slowly. And the repair is not quite complete, but the living coral has advanced over the broken edge, and the process of calcification is filling in the damaged area, one thin layer of mineral at a time. In 10 years, you will not be able to see the damage. The octopus is hunting in the afternoon light, which it prefers to the cover of night. It has changed color several times in the last hour, matching the coral, then the sand, then the shadow of a large sponge, and it is now working its way along the base of the reef, arms probing every crevice. It finds a small shrimp, takes it, continues. It finds a piece of broken shell, investigates it, moves on. The sea turtle has been here for an hour, resting on the bottom of the sandy patch behind the reef. It breathes from time to time, rising to the surface with a few powerful strokes, and taking a breath and descending again. It is a large animal, a green sea turtle, perhaps 80 years old, and its size gives it a certain authority among the reef's residents. Other animals move around it without much concern. The turtle neither threatens nor cowers. It is simply very large and very old, and it has been part of this reef for longer than anyone observing it has been alive. The afternoon light shifts as clouds pass overhead. The colors of the reef dim briefly, and then brighten again. The water moves in the gentle Caribbean swell. Everything here is old and patient and continuously renewing itself. The coral building, its slow mineral architecture, the octopus regrowing its arm in the darkness of its den, the reef accumulating layer by layer from the activity of millions of individual lives, and the turtle rests on the sandy bottom, and the parrotfish eats, and the afternoon goes on. The deep forests of the Pacific Northwest. Once more. The old growth forest in spring is an awakening. After the long gray winter, months of rain and low light and the deep, mossy quiet of the dormant season, the first warmth of March brings a cascade of change. The sword ferns that have been flattened by snow stand upright again, and new fronds emerge from their bases, unfurling with a slow, deliberate elegance. The vine maples flush with tiny, pale green leaves that turn the understory, for a brief period in early spring, into something almost luminous. The stream, still running high from snowmelt, is clear and fast and loud. The Pacific giant salamander has emerged from its winter shelter. It is thinner than it was in the fall. It has lost some weight through the dormant months. But it is active now, moving through the wet leaf litter with the confident, unhurried efficiency of an animal that knows exactly what it is doing. The tail, which was still slightly smaller than full size in the fall, has continued to grow through the winter, slowly, even during dormancy, and it is now complete, full-sized, You cannot tell anymore that it was ever damaged. The forest in spring smells of a particular combination of things: wet earth, new growth, the clean scent of the cedar and the fir, and something else, something that is harder to name, that is the smell of the forest coming back to life. It is distinct and unmistakable, and, to anyone who knows it, one of the most welcome smells in the world. A brown creeper makes its way up the bark of a large Douglas fir, spiraling around the trunk in its characteristic way, probing the bark with its curved bill for the insects that live in the fissures of the bark. It reaches the top of the trunk and then flies to the base of the next tree and begins again. This is all it does, all day. Spiral up, fly to the base, spiral up again. And yet it is not repetitive in any way that diminishes it. It is simply the life of a brown creeper, complete and sufficient. The salamander finds a large earthworm in the leaf litter and takes it. It does not rush. It positions itself and takes the worm with a deliberate, unhurried snap, and the worm is gone, and the salamander continues. The creek nearby runs clear and cold over the mossy stones. The old fir above sheds its water droplets onto the leaves below in a slow, irregular dripping, and the spring forest breathes and opens and begins again. The freshwater marshes of the American South, once more. The marsh in April is full of the sounds of nesting birds. Every territory has been staked, every nest site has been chosen, and the air is layered with the calls of redwings and grackles and snipe, and the various herons that have settled into the tall reeds. The water level is high from spring rains, and the edges of the marsh are soft and indefinite, the water spreading into the surrounding fields and roads in tentative, exploratory ways. The two planarians, the two halves of the animal that was divided some months ago, are both complete now. Both are full-sized, full functional animals, moving through the dark water beneath the duckweed, hunting in their patient, gliding away. Neither retains any memory of its former state as half an animal. Neither has any knowledge that the other exists. They're simply two planarians now, in the same marsh, going about their independent lives. This is perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of planarian regeneration. Not just that the pieces grow back, but that each piece becomes, fully and completely, a whole individual. There is no incomplete version. There is no half-healed wound. Each fragment, given enough time, is simply an animal, as complete as any other animal of its kind, with all the behaviors and capacities of its species, needing nothing from what it once was connected to. The marsh in spring has a quality of urgency that it doesn't have in summer or fall. Everything is nesting. Everything is growing. Everything is pushing toward the long days of warmth that come in June and July. But underneath this urgency, the deeper rhythms of the marsh continue at their own pace. The planarian moves at the speed of a planarian. The duckweed grows at the speed of duckweed. The water moves at the speed of water, and none of these rhythms are hurried. A painted turtle has hauled out on a log at the edge of the water and is basking in the warm April sun, its orange and yellow striped neck extended, its dark shell absorbing heat. It does not move. It barely breathes. It is simply maximizing its contact with the warmth that has come after the long cold, and in this single-minded basking, there is something deeply relatable. The deep cellular pleasure of warmth after cold, of sun after gray. The marsh continues. The planarian moves. The turtle basks. The redwing calls from its cattail. And somewhere below the surface, in the dark water where nothing is watching, two animals that were once one go about their separate lives, complete and whole, and unaware of anything remarkable in their existence. The grasslands of East Africa once more. The short rains have come, after months of dry season, when the grass turned golden and then gray, and the rivers dropped to their lowest levels, and the animals concentrated around the remaining water holes in numbers that made the water hole the most important place in the landscape. The rains have finally arrived. They came first as scattered afternoon showers, and then as more reliable afternoon storms, and then 3 days ago as a steady, all-day rain that lasted 20 hours and turned the landscape from dust-colored to green overnight. The change in the grassland after the first rains is one of the most dramatic transformations in the natural world. Within 48 hours of the first significant rain, the ground is green. The grass, dormant for months in its roots, responds to the water with such urgency that you can almost see it growing. The dust roads through the park have become red mud. The dry riverbeds have water in them. The acacia trees are beginning to flush new leaves, and the landscape that was gray and dusty is now many shades of green, overlaid with the gold of the still wet grass. The skink on its rock has a new tail now. After the long, dry season, the regeneration process had slowed with the heat and the dryness, but the rains have brought it back to its full pace, and the tail, which was perhaps 70% regrown at the end of the dry season, has accelerated rapidly in the last few weeks. It is very nearly complete. One more growth period, perhaps 4 to 6 weeks, and it will be finished. The grassland after the rains is alive in a way that is difficult to describe without being there. The insects that have been dormant emerge in their billions. The birds that follow the insects arrive in their thousands. The frogs that have been buried in the soil, some of them for months, waiting in a state of suspended animation for exactly this, dig themselves out and begin calling, and the landscape fills with a sound that was entirely absent during the dry season. It is the sound of life returning, which is one of the great sounds of the world. The wildebeest have been moving toward the rains. Their movement is not planned or organized in any conscious way. It is simply that they move toward green grass, and green grass follows the rains. And so the rains draw them across the Serengeti in their hundreds of thousands, a movement that has been happening for millions of years. They will come and graze and move on, and the grass will grow behind them, and the cycle will continue, unhurried and inexorable, as it has always done. The rain has stopped for now, though clouds still pile up on the horizon and will build again this afternoon. The sun has come out, and the landscape is brilliant. The green of the grass, the red of the mud, the white of the clouds, all sharply lit and saturated. A rainbow stands over the far ridge, its colors vivid against the dark cloud behind it. The skink on its warm rock basks in the returning sun, its tail nearly complete, its world full of water and insects and warm stone. The Arctic Ocean. Once more, the Arctic summer has reached its height. The ice has retreated far to the north, and the water that has been covered for 9 months is now open and breathing. and full of life. The sun circles at a low angle, never quite setting, painting the water in long shadows and flat, warm light that makes the surface look like hammered gold. The air is cold, but the sky is bright and wide and empty of clouds, and the light goes on and on. The narwhal pods have moved north with the retreating ice. Several pods have converged in this area, drawn by the concentration of Arctic cod that gather at the ice edge to feed on the krill. The narwhals are diving deep, 600 meters, sometimes deeper, to reach the fish, coming up to breathe at the surface before diving again. Their tusks, which are actually elongated teeth, sensory organs sensitive to changes in pressure and temperature and salinity, test the water as they surface, reading information from the sea that we cannot fully comprehend. The immortal jellyfish is not in these cold waters. It prefers warmer seas. But the moon jellyfish is here in numbers, its bells pulsing steadily through the cold water, feeding on the plankton that is abundant at the surface. A moon jellyfish that was damaged by a boat propeller 2 weeks ago has regenerated the torn portion of its bell. The process took only days. Jellyfish regenerate faster than most animals, and the repaired portion is now indistinguishable from the original. The jellyfish does not know it was injured. It does not know it healed. It simply continues, pulsing, drifting, doing what jellyfish do. A polar bear swims across an open lead between ice floes, its large paws pulling through the water with a steady, patient stroke. It is not in a hurry. It has been swimming for an hour and will swim for another hour before it reaches the ice floe it is making for. The water is cold, just above freezing, but the bear's fur and fat insulate it effectively, and it swims without apparent discomfort, its head held above the water, its eyes calm. The light at midnight is strange and beautiful. It is not dark. It will not be truly dark for another 2 months, but the quality of the light has changed, become softer and more horizontal, the shadows longer, the colors more amber. The narwhals at the surface catch this light on their gray backs and gleam. The water around them is still and clear and very cold, and the world turns, slowly, on its axis, and the Arctic summer continues, and everything that lives here goes on living in the way that everything has always lived, by renewing itself, by repairing what is broken, by beginning again from whatever remains.